Oh hey, look, I have headphones now, so you know we're talking about audio stuff. Wow, AKG is dead. Or is it? I've always been interested in getting an AKG K7 headphone, as I've heard nothing but good things about him, and I was in the market for a new editing headphone, so the AKG K702 seemed like a really good fit for me. It's one of AKG's more popular headphones, along with the K712 Pro, and, you know, the K240, which is a headphone that's been around forever. They're one of those legendary European audio brands that's been around forever, along with Sennheiser and Bear Dynamic. But a certain audio YouTuber, whether he means to or not, I'm sure he doesn't mean to, has been kind of pushing this narrative that AKG is dead. You know, I'm actually a big fan of Wade's, so please don't get it twisted. It's just I disagree with him on this. So he kinda had me worried that if I bought a K702 today, it was gonna be a completely different headphone than what it used to be. But the truth is, it's a bit more complicated than Samsung bought AKG and now all AKG products are garbage. On paper, it looks like AKG is dead. Yeah, but like I said, there's a bit more to it. In fact, there are actually people on the opposite side of the aisle who say that AKG products are actually better after the acquisition happened. AKG became a publicly traded company back in the 80s, and in 1994 they got bought by Harman International. And Harman has done a lot of research in the field of audio. Some of you more experienced audiophiles might recognize them as the people behind the Harman Target, which, if this is the first time you're hearing about the Harman Target, the TLDR is it's a sound profile developed by Harman with a lot of research behind it that suggests that it's the sound profile that is the most pleasing to the majority of people. Samsung bought Harman in 2016, and when they bought Harman, they got JBL and AKG, as those were two of the brands that Harman was currently in charge of. You ever think to yourself, hey, these Samsung Galaxy Buds sound pretty good? Well, it's because those were developed using Harman's research. Yes, Samsung bought AKG and shifted production over to China, but that's not the end of the story. While Samsung may be Harman International's parent company, they still operate as an independent subsidiary of Samsung. It's a little bit more nuanced than Samsung bought AKG, and now it's a dead brand and Samsung just slaps the AKG logo on random crap. Although, yeah, they do be doing that also. I do own a pair of the Samsung Beans, and I won't lie, these do kind of sound like shit. So, while some were quick to say it was the death of AKG, at the same time, a lot of new AKG products are actually really good. The K371 is a really good wired closed-back headphone, and their newer Bluetooth headphones like the NC700 are also damn good headphones, and it's because Harman is still in charge of development. The AKG NC400 are a pair of Bluetooth earbuds that sound absolutely incredible, and you know, Critical even went out and said that they were the best sounding wireless earbuds at one point in time, so huh? Plus, you can still get their older products, like they're still being made, including the K7 series. I really would like to do a comparison between a pre-acquisition and a post-acquisition K702 to see how much of a difference there is in build quality, but whether or not there is a difference isn't something that I can really confirm at the moment. Also, just a disclaimer, I'm just one guy doing a headphone video, and all these opinions I'm about to say are my own, so I encourage you to also please do your own research instead of only listening to me. Some people say that the build quality is worse now, others are saying it's exactly the same, but as of right now, that's something that I just can't verify. But if the only thing that's changed is they're being made in China now, is that really such a terrible thing? Yes, it sucks, but that's just kind of how big companies be doing. I get that people would probably prefer that companies would manufacture things in their country of origin, but that's just not real life. It's just a reality that I've simply come to expect at this point. I mean, smartphones are made in China, and I hardly ever see anybody complain about it. Aw man, I really like my iPhone, but it's just too bad that Apple makes them in China and they fucking suck now. They really should shift production back to the United States. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that. So today, let's take a look at the K702. After all, this headphone is another one of those legendary staples that studios and editors really love to use. And because I was looking for a new editing headphone, I went ahead and I got one for myself. So, let's dive in. Build quality. I would summarize the build quality of the K702 as a little cheap. Nothing on this headphone feels exceptionally nice. Aside from the earpads and headband, everything on this headphone is made of plastic, and it's also a little rickety. Headband feels like it's made of faux leather, and it feels alright. It's not horrible, and for $200 the build quality is acceptable. While nothing on it feels nice, nothing on it feels particularly bad either, and it's very functional. Earpads are soft enough, though they feel a bit stiffer than they appear. They're not really all that squishy. The plastic, while not premium or or anything isn't something I can really complain about. The headphones don't really feel all that durable, but hey, it's still nicer than Grados. Overall, it's really nothing to write home about. I don't mean to kinda gloss over the build quality, but there's not too much I have to say about it. It doesn't feel particularly great, but it doesn't feel awful. It just feels alright, and overall is functional. The ear cups have adequate swivel and padding, and the headband is self-adjusting, which is a feature that I do like. One thing that does slightly worry me is the mechanism for the self-adjusting headband. It has a few moving parts, and it feels like this is a place where the build could possibly fail. This bit here just does not feel sturdy, and the bungees are definitely at risk of wearing out, making this whole mechanism fail. And to my knowledge, if this breaks, it's not going to be easy to replace, meaning you might end up having to buy a new headphone, which would be a total bummer. One thing I do like is the connector on the headphone is a mini XLR, and it's completely removable, so that's a plus. It also does the thing where the cable terminates in 3.5mm, but has a 1/4-inch screw-on phallic-shaped adapter. Pretty standard for studio headphones. One other gripe I have is the cable they include is just way too short. It's roughly the same length as a city block, and that's just nowhere near enough length on this cable. I need a cable that's at least 3 kilometers long, otherwise it's just not even worth using. It's a total ripoff. Actually, yeah, AKG include a very long cable, and I'm personally not a fan of it. I don't know who needs a cable that's this long, but me, I just don't need it, and they only include this one, so if you want to get a shorter cable, you're probably gonna have to get an aftermarket one. You know, this headphone currently goes for about $145 to $165 US, depending on sales and where you get it, and for that money, this is about the build quality that I'd expect for this price. It's light, it's made of plastic, it's functional, it feels okay, but it isn't really all that nice. But this headphone went for like $400 when it originally released, and when I think about that, then I hope the ones that were made in Austria have a nicer build quality than this. Like, if I paid $400 for this headphone and this was the build quality I got, I just assumed that I had just gotten ripped off. Like, at some point during the delivery, somebody got a hold of it, opened the box, took out the real headphone, and put in a cheap copy, and then this was the cheap copy. AKG's website still has these listed at $400 though, so if you did want to spend that kind of money on a K702, well, good news, you still can, but like, I don't recommend it, but hey, the option is still on the table. Comfort. The benefit of being made of all plastic is it makes the headphone very light. The pads on the AKG K702 are pretty soft, though I kinda wish they were a bit more plush. While they provide a good amount of padding, they're actually quite firm, so having them squish a bit more is something that I'd personally prefer. Though these are still pretty new to me, and there is the possibility that they'll soften up with more time in use. Though the current pads aren't bad by any means, I just wish they were plush. More plushier? The pads are also easy to swap out, so if you do want to get aftermarket pads for these, you can easily do so. The self-adjusting headband is made of faux leather and doesn't have any padding. At first glance, it seems like this might not feel comfortable. However, due to the lightness of the headphone and how its weight is being evenly distributed, it didn't pose any discomfort at all. The headband itself is also very flexible and thin. Clamp force on this headphone is noticeable, but it's just enough to give the user a secure fit without squeezing in a way that may cause fatigue. Overall, while I wish the pads were a bit more plush, this headphone is still pretty comfortable, and seeing as I've already edited a video on it, I can wear this for hours on end with no issues. Sound quality. Alright, so now the big question, how does it sound? Out of all the headphones I own, this is the one that probably measures the most neutral or flat out of all of them. People who like a more colored sound signature are probably going to think that the AKG K702 sounds boring. No one frequency band seems to stand out too much over another. It's a sound profile that's really well suited to editing, mixing, and mastering. It allows for an audio reproduction to give the listener an accurate amount of bass, mids, and treble in the mix. The bass rolls off starting at about 80 Hz. Typically, open-back dynamic driver headphones tend to leak in the bass. They just kind of do that as a result of their design. So you're really not getting any low-end rumble, nor are you getting any sort of punch or slam. The bass tends to prioritize quality of bass over the quantity. It's pretty subdued, and those who want warmth and slam are gonna be disappointed with this aspect of the headphone. But what bass is there sounds quite good and is what I would describe as sounding tight and clean. But if you want something that has a bassy sound profile, I would skip these. Then through the mid-range, it's really flat until we get into the upper mids, lower treble. There's this hump right here in the 1K region that's gonna make vocals and lead instruments sound quite forward, perhaps a bit shouty for some, though I personally don't think it sounds shouty, though others might. This results in all instruments sounding very clear and not obstructed in any way. Vocals have this sort of quality of sounding as though they sit above other instruments, but it doesn't interfere with them, so its vocal presentation is well executed. Its treble is also well executed. It's in this sweet spot where it sounds very analytical without sounding overly bright. It's not what I would describe as sounding laid back, but it's not harsh or piercing at all either. It has quite good upper treble extension, so cymbals have a little extra splash to them. Vocals have a little bit of that nice airy quality to them too, and at no point did I feel like it was too bright. What this results in is a sound profile that's quite detailed but non-fatiguing. Overall, I would describe its tuning as really quite balanced, with a little bit of upper mid-range emphasis, making it sort of a Swiss Army knife that's good for all music genres. However, no individual part of its tuning super stands out as being exceptional. It feels like it's kind of lacking any sort of wow factor. It's a little bit like vanilla ice cream. It's reliable and it tastes good, but there's more flavorful things available. But hey, a lot of people really like vanilla ice cream, and that's perfectly cool. But that's what makes it a really good headphone for editing, because it's the type of sound profile that isn't meant to enhance the recording. It's going for accuracy, so it's gonna keep you from being distracted, and it'll keep you honest with your mix. The best way I would describe this headphone's timbre is correct. It just sounds good in a way that I can't really complain about. It's inoffensive, but it's nothing exceptional either. Where this headphone really shines is soundstage and imaging. These headphones are very wide in a way that's a lot like speakers. In this way, they almost feel like the antithesis of the HD600, as those have a soundstage that sounds very close and intimate, whereas music sounds very open on the K702. There were details in recordings that sounded like they were coming from somewhere inside my room that I hadn't really noticed before, and it wasn't until I took the headphones off that I realized that it was actually a part of the recording and not coming from somewhere within my room. Imaging on the K702 is also excellent. It's very effective at recreating positional information to the listener. Big orchestral recordings are super fun to listen to through the K702, and one in particular that I recommend is the recording of the National Symphony Orchestra of Ukraine performing Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition. For real, it's magical. It makes those recordings sound very big. In fact, its very good imaging combined with its upper treble extension makes the AKG K702 a very capable gaming headphone. The wide soundstage makes it really fun for playing open world games because it gives you that sense of immersion, and its ability to provide very accurate positional information along with its high-end detail it has could give someone a potential competitive edge in an FPS game. So your boy plays a lot of Titanfall 2, and normally I suck at this game, but when I use the K702, I'm not gonna lie, it feels a little bit like I'm playing with audio wall hacks. It's so easy to hear the location of enemy jump jets. An actual good player who got a pair of these could probably just completely dominate, but you know, it only let me play slightly better than I normally do. You know, I'm normally of the belief that having a good piece of gear doesn't necessarily make you play better. Gear is no substitute for practice, basically skill issue. But the K702 had me reconsidering that opinion a little bit, let me tell you. The instrument separation is top notch. I see its immediate competitors being the headphones in the Sennheiser HD5 series, and it easily outperforms those headphones in terms of both information and detail retrieval and instrument separation. Another popular headphone in this price category is the HiFiMan HE400 SE, which is currently going for about $100. This is a planar magnetic headphone that also provides very good performance for the cost. The K702 offers about the same level of detail as the HE400 SE, though I prefer its sonic characteristics over the HiFiMan. The K702's soundstage is also significantly wider while still providing about the same amount of detail and instrument separation. Both are strong contenders in the under $200 price category, but I would still choose the K702 over the HE400 SE. Its layering is quite good, which is another aspect of the headphone that makes it ideal for editing and mixing. I can easily hear instrument lines independent from one another, which is a huge benefit to its sound quality. Overall thoughts on this headphone sound-wise. Its tuning is very neutral and is solid overall, but some people are going to think it sounds boring, making it kind of ideal for mixing and mastering with an excellent excellent technical performance. Drivability on the K702 is weird because the box says that this headphone has an impedance of 62 ohms and a sensitivity of 105 dB, so I thought they'd be pretty easy to drive off of a phone or from my computer, but I found that I did need to use an amp for these, so I'm not sure if those numbers are correct. They just didn't sound right if they weren't being supplied with enough power. Most entry-level amps should be enough to power it, but you probably will need some sort of amp. So if you do want to get these, you should also look into getting an amp if you don't already have one. I only have a couple of amps and they're both solid states, so I can't really comment on what the best amplifier for these are, but they do sound pretty great out of my iFi Zendak V2 and out of my Little Fio Q3. So yeah, do I recommend it? Certainly not for $400. The build quality alone would make it completely not worth it at that price, but for under 200 bucks, it's a very strong choice. Before I got my K702, I edited my videos on my Sennheiser HD6XX. As you can probably tell by the really worn out pads, I used this a ton, and for a while, this was my daily driver, but I definitely prefer to edit on the K702, though for listening to music, I may still choose the 6XX over it in a lot of cases. The 6XX has a sound signature that I find more enjoyable than the K702 for listening to music, but if you want a headphone that sounds really flat and has good detail and don't want to spend too much, then yeah, get the K702. Gaming on the K702 is super fun due to its wide soundstage and great presentation of positional information, so if you want a gaming headphone, this is worth considering. It's worth it if you can find it for under 200 bucks, but I wouldn't spend more than that on these. So is AKG dead? Well, I certainly still like them, and even though the original engineers are no longer at the company, AKG is still making good products, so don't be afraid to look at their options if you're in the market for a new piece of gear. Sadly, it's still beat by Apple EarPods. You simply cannot dethrone the king.